Isaiah 48 and 49 are quoted in their entirety at the end of 1st Nephi. It may seem odd to conclude a gripping story about crossing the ocean by copying and pasting in 2 chapters of prophecies from Isaiah, but these chapters likely held special meaning for Nephi as he likened them to himself. These chapters can give us hope in the redemption of Jesus Christ, and they can strengthen our faith in the power of prophecy. While Nephi likely understood and recognized the Israelite context of Isaiah's prophecies, he took the liberty to apply these prophecies to himself and to his family. Isaiah 48 speaks of how the Lord tried Israel while they were in exile in Babylon, yet he would one day gather Israel through a special servant. Nephi may have resonated with this message to exiled Israel, since he and his family were separated from the rest of Israel by an ocean, and he was separated from his own brothers when they divided into tribes. The chapter chastises Israel for claiming to be of God's holy city, yet claiming that title in vain because of their wickedness. And Nephi may have likened this to how Laman and Lemuel boasted that God's holy city of Jerusalem couldn't be destroyed, even though it was ripe for destruction because of their wickedness. In Isaiah, the Lord condemns Israel's stiff necks and stubbornness, similar to how Laman and Lemuel were described as having stiff necks. And the end of the chapter laments, "Oh, that thou hadst hearkened to my commandments, then had thy peace been as a river, and thy righteousness as the waves of the sea." This powerful plea is reminiscent of Lehi's poetic declarations to Laman to keep God's commandments. "Oh, that thou mightest be like unto this river, continually running into the fountain of all righteousness." At the end of Isaiah 48, it talks about how God miraculously led Israel through the wilderness in the Exodus, and he would lead them again if they would just flee from Babylon. Nephi witnessed how God miraculously led his family across the ocean in their efforts to flee persecution in Jerusalem and their alternative fate in the Babylonian exile. A major emphasis of Isaiah 48 is on the legitimacy of God's prophecies. In the first half of Isaiah 48, the Lord declared that he had revealed former things from the beginning, or in other words, ancient, long-standing prophecy. The Lord revealed certain prophecies well in advance so that they would serve as a witness to God's divine power when the prophecies were fulfilled. Within the book of Isaiah, God also revealed new prophecy that no one had heard before up to this point. God revealed these new prophecies so that when they quickly came to pass, they could also stand as a witness to the authenticity of God's prophecies. So whether the prophecy is old or new, God operates through prophecy to show that he knows the end from the beginning and is in control of the whole earth. He reveals his plan through his prophets so that people may understand God's power and foreknowledge. In ancient Israel's case, these prophecies in Isaiah gave them hope that they would eventually be delivered from captivity in Babylon. And for Nephi, he saw these prophecies as witnesses of Jesus Christ, who would bring ultimate deliverance for all of mankind. In 1 Nephi chapter 19, right before Nephi quoted Isaiah 48, he expounded on prophecies of Jesus Christ. He cited the prophecies of Zenos, of Zenock, of Nahum, and others to testify how the Redeemer would sacrifice himself to atone for the sins of the world. The Redeemer would also eventually gather scattered Israel home. And this may have been a huge comfort to Nephi, who likely felt isolated from his homeland and his people. So despite being far from Jerusalem, he knew that the Redeemer would eventually gather all of Israel again. And despite his own family fracturing and separating into tribes, he knew that the Redeemer would heal their scattering. And the reason Nephi knew this is because he believed in the power of prophecy. Isaiah 48 testified that God's prophets really do foretell God's will. Sometimes they prophesy things hundreds of years in the future, and sometimes they prophesy of things immediately relevant to their people. But they always testify of God. In our day, President Nelson has warned the church of ways that we can spiritually prepare for challenging times ahead. President Nelson also consistently testifies of Jesus Christ. Following the prophet and believing in his prophecies will ensure that we are protected from the destruction of ancient Jerusalem. We, like Nephi and his family, can be led through the wilderness by listening to the prophet. As Isaiah says, "Then will our peace be as a river and our righteousness as the waves of the sea."